whoever views it in the future.
What's that?
Us and whoever views it in the future.
Right.
Nice.
Did you get a chance to put this event in the paper?
Not in the paper.
Yeah.
Posted on the Facebook for the apothecary.
Flyers around town.
Flyers around town. We have flyers in a few different places. We've been up for about a month.
The
Couple
Ohio
weeks.
paper would
Couple
be-
weeks, yeah. Couple weeks.
Or you could even put it in the Ventura paper, the Ohio paper and the Ventura paper, and possibly the Santa Barbara paper. They all have weekly papers.
Mhm. It's a good idea.
And it's free.
Oh, really?
Is it?
Yeah, just a listing of things to do around town, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Do you know how early you have to put it in? Is like
Usually a week.
That's not too bad. It's good to know.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you used to be able to get away with 3 or 4 days, but I would count on a week.
Very cool. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. Use that for the future.
You live in Ohio?
I do now.
Okay. You moved from
Hawaii.
which island?
Big Island.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah.
That's the Spirit Island. Oh well, I mean they all have spirit, but that's the island that I can feel it the most.
You feel a lot of things there.
Powerful.
Things you want to run away from. All right, so we'll commence. My name is Jack Weber. I have just moved here from Hawaii, Big Island, told John. Thank you to the apothecary, Jericho, Taka, Tom Incorporated. And so thank you for having me and creating a great venue for events.
Yeah, she's done a great job. Yeah, thanks for being here, man.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
So especially since we're a small group, if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to signal me. And if I'm in the middle of a little rant, I'll just get to you like as soon as I'm done with my train of thought. And yeah, so my purpose here tonight is to use this lens of Chinese medicine, and especially the metaphors of Chinese medicine. And that primary metaphor of Chinese medicine is Yin-Yang, and this is the Yin-Yang symbol. And I'm going to go ahead later and fill in the 5 elements there and kind of show the regenerative cycle and why this symbol, I feel, is a quintessential symbol for our times, and one that can help us stand back from the nitty-gritty of everyday life and all the issues that are going on and all the good and not so good things that are afoot on our planet right now. And one of the advantages of that is I think it lends a certain kind of comfort and a certain sort of ongoing meditation into how to view things from a dialectic that to me really makes a lot of sense, and is the only thing that I found that really encapsulates all the dynamics that we deal with. So both personally and collectively. So I have a few poems to read tonight, and I hope I'll get to at least one of them. And I selected a few poems that communicate some aspects of the medicine, of the metaphors, of the cycles that I'm going to convey. And the beauty of poetry is it speaks to us on a different level, right? And Chinese medicine itself is a poetic system of healing, and all its framework is poetic. So Yin-Yang included, and especially the 5 elements. So that's why they're so powerful. It's like an archetypal system in and of itself. So one of the presuppositions for the evening is that what I have prepared, which I'm also going to kind of tailor to what you guys are interested in, is that this is about integration. So Yin-Yang and the dialectics of Yin and Yang, right? The dark and the light, the male, the masculine and the feminine, create a tension, right? So it's about holding the tension of opposites. And so much of our lives are about holding the tension of opposites. And the opposite of holding the tension of opposites is to go into black or white thinking. And we want to have black and white thinking.
Simultaneously, or go in between the two.
Yeah, or just to hold it, whether we're in, whether we're in a yin phase in the moment, that's fine. If we're in a yang phase the next moment, but eventually just, our minds can eventually hold both of those, right? So cognitive dissonance is being able to, let's use them in different ways, but it's essentially being able to hold different points of view at the same time.
Like equanimity.
Yeah, certain equanimity. Right. So the yin-yang symbol is a symbol of equanimity. So I'll probably go into tonight some deepening and spiraling complexity. And there's a meme in our times that complexity, everybody's tired of complexity, but I think one of the problems with complexity is that the complexity that we have isn't integrated. So it's a lot of mishmash, it's a lot of things coming at us from a lot of different angles. We don't really have, an integrated body of knowledge that's presented to us that integrates a lot of the dynamics that we deal with on a daily basis. So again, that's part of what this presentation is about, is to give a framework and to give a metaphorical system to sort of be able to digest and understand the complexities of life. And I'm of the belief that life is inherently complex, and that if we try to make it too simple, we just dumb it down. And dumbing something down means that we stay narrow-visioned and superficial and don't appreciate the breadth and the depth of life, which we have to do. Otherwise, it comes back to get us. And that's part of what Yin-Yang demonstrates, which I'll show later. Does that make sense? So maybe I'll begin by just asking you four if there's something particular that you have an interest in, or if you came here with any particular interest in what grabbed you to the talk, or the Yin and Yang title of it.
Had a fascination with Yin and Yang in Chinese medicine for a very long time. I even have a Yin and Yang symbol on my school ring, my high school ring, from a Catholic school. So
Whoa!
it's something that's always caught my interest as a Libra, I guess, the balance and the harmony in between that, and studying martial arts and Chinese medicine has always been fascinating. So wanted to connect with your principles of it. And I already know I'm in the right place by seeing the protocol for emotional intelligence here on the paper, because that's some of the deep work I've been doing lately. So just glad to be in the right spot.
Cool. So what I'm hearing is you just want to hear my shtick on Yin Yang and just wherever I go with it.
Yeah, that and the emotional intelligence piece and how it weaves together.
That will certainly come in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Calling out to me.
So I had a lady friend who was describing my new awarenesses of physical wellness as yin and yang, because there's an idea of physical well-being. One way of accomplishing that is to tense and relax. She says, "Oh, that's yin yang." In fact, I told her she should come to that because that's right where I was with the physical wellness kind of thing, the tensing and relaxing, and I've added to that breathing, exhaling and inhaling, and then some awareness of Gestalt psychology, which is very central. You could say it's central to Gestalt psychology in always being aware of the opposites. There's always an attraction somewhere else, and balancing where you are, the opposites, being in the middle of that continuum is kind of a yin-yang thing.
So do you have anything in particular about what you just shared that you want to hear more about? I mean, I'm sort of going to address dialectics the whole presentation.
Yeah, I'm integrating it. I used to be into it a lot and then faded away from it. Now I realize the profoundness of it, especially in anyone that's been an repressed kid. I mean, if they went to Catholic school or something, just it's particularly valuable because you when you're repressing stuff, you're just not even aware of the other side.
Right.
It's like, no, gotta hold in.
Right. Hopefully, we'll talk about repression too.
Depression.
Oh,
Is that what you said?
I said repression.
Oh, repression.
But
Okay, yeah.
we'll talk about.
Yeah, which could lead
we'll
to
talk about
depression.
exactly. We'll talk about depression too. It's on the list.
Cool.
All right.
Oh, cool.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
When you said dialectic, I thought interior world, exterior world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's maybe another expression of the archetype.
That's correct. So yin is interior, yang is exterior.
Right. And we're dealing with that continuously.
Right. So one of the principles, just to address that real quickly, one of the principles of yin and yang is a constant interdynamic between them, a constant interpromotion. So yin, I'm going to maybe list some qualities that are yin and some qualities that are yang. Those are all sort of opposites or dialectics. And there's a constant interface between the two, right? So this little black dot in yang means that within yang there's always yin. So yang never exists just on its own. And yin never exists on its own. It has the white dot of yang. So that's just the beginning brilliance of this symbol, right? So our skin is a semi-permeable membrane. Okay, so it lets certain things in from the outside and it doesn't let in other things. And you could think of this line down here as our skin in a way, right? That this is the interior of our body and this is the exterior. There's a constant interplay between the exterior and the interior, right? So that we're, contrary to some New Age memes, we're constantly affected by our environment.
So what is the membrane?
The membrane is our skin, in this, metaphorically, in this sense.
Right.
But it's also
And
something
physical,
else.
on the physical.
Yeah. And it's also, I'll also use it as a different metaphor.
Yeah.
So, so that's a constant interface, right? And as I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit, but that's okay. So as the cycle goes, right? So the cycle goes this way. And that's the cycle of transformation, the cycle of regeneration. And as that happens, yin and yang are woven into one another. Okay, and deepening and broadening complexity. So that's just a brief answer. There's Anita. Is that Anita? Hi, come on in.
Thank you.
I just
Hello.
flashed on something else.
Yeah.
Right.
What is the lot to flash?
It's not sitting here.
Hey there. Nice to see you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
That's just a little handout, some quotes that sort of speak to what's happening tonight. We've already begun. Do you have a particular interest in the presentation or a specific interest that you'd like to hear about? I'm just checking in.
Well, I'm kind of just here because I'm curious about your intellect.
Okay.
And what you might have to say.
I want to do a brain scan.
And because you were kind of, I read a little bit on your website and I was actually interested initially in your, climate change and all of that. But I'm just interested in the wisdom and,
Okay.
New.
Great.
Okay.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could see you. All right.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, you can add something.
Okay. This right here, this shape,
Mm-hmm.
that's a zygote.
That's a zygote.
Yeah. That's a head and a body. That's a embryo.
Oh, the embryo, right.
That is the shape of an embryo.
It gets
And that's-
stranger than that.
And that's the eye. You get it? That shape
Yeah.
right there?
Ah.
That's a trip. I just never noticed that before. And then what is the opposite one? That's a reverse embryo.
The rest of the other fluid, the without.
Anita reminded me of part of the reason I came here is I saw that you're very into integrative medicine. So
Hello.
at some point, I hope you will elaborate on what resource you are for that.
Okay. And we might talk after about that.
Okay.
I mean, you'll glean some of it from
Yeah.
here.
Cool.
Hi, Carrie.
Right.
Hey.
Wisdom, I was up there.
Okay. 2 pages of quotes, which I think you'll appreciate.
Nice.
All right, so I actually have an outline for tonight, and I am going to attempt to follow this somewhat.
Nice.
I usually just go off, and what happens is that a lot of neat things come out, but then I forget, to mention certain things that I wish that I did. So it's probably not going to work, but I'm going to try it anyway. So first of all, let me ask, so we're going to just take turns real quick, and just tell me one thing besides what I said that you know about the Yin-Yang symbol.
Symbol of balance, but you kind of already said that.
Okay? I didn't say balance, but it's implied.
But harmony.
But yeah, harmony and balance.
It's actually always moving, dynamic.
All right. That counts, because you weren't here. I already said that.
I am.
All right,
just
that's
a
fine.
guess.
That's fine.
And it moves clockwise.
Right.
Both of those, I see, that's the motion.
Right, it moves clockwise.
Right.
Right? So one of the questions I was going to ask, a leading question is, why does this symbol have to be this way? If you Google the Yin-Yang symbol, you'll see it all kinds of crazy ways. You'll see it on its side, you'll see the dark side on the other side, you'll see this, these are called paisleys, right? I call them paisleys. And I actually got that term from Jordan Peterson. So I've studied this for like decades, and I never knew what to call them swirls. So when he said paisley, I said, that's so cool. So this is the yin paisley, and that's the yang paisley. So this is all dark. I just saved the ink by not filling in the whole thing. So what was I saying?
You were saying that you
There's a
didn't fill
reason
it all
it's
in, and I was
like
thinking,
that.
because you're an environmental.
Yeah, that's part of it. What?
There's a reason it's exactly like
Oh, right. So, thank you. So, yeah. So there's a reason for it. So sometimes this big white part will be down here, and the big part of the dark will be up here. And I mean, that's sort of okay. But there's a reason why it needs to be like this, and we'll go into that. Does anyone have any idea why?
As opposed to being horizontal.
Yeah, horizontal or flipped 180.
About energy.
The orbital cycle has to go clockwise for a reason. There's a way the polarity works.
I don't think
Well,
so.
It is vertical. It's on a vertical. There's a vertical axis to this.
Mm-hmm.
There's the dot on the yin. I believe it's the yin, the white one,
Mm-hmm.
is exactly directly above the lower one.
Right.
So it's a vertical axis.
Right.
So I wonder what that's about. Why is it a vertical axis as opposed to a horizontal?
All right.
Because you could turn it, it would be horizontal.
Well, why don't we just find out soon? Okay, so anyway, it was a leading question, so we'll get to it. Okay. So one thing I want to mention is that I think most of us here, to greater or lesser degrees, are interested in living a natural life. And most people think of living naturally as eating natural food, using natural products, being environmental. And I want to introduce another 2 levels of living naturally. And one is rooted in appreciating the death and rebirth cycle. Right? So this is the death and rebirth cycle, which I'll explain in a moment. And this death and rebirth cycle is the model of nature. That is how things happen in life. And if we only want the life part and the bright part, which is the yang part, we're going to create more death than we need to. And if we only want the dark side, we're also going to create more suffering and more death than we need So this death and rebirth cycle happens to us physically in cells that die and are sloughed off, right, and new cells are born. It happens with our ideas, right, that we have certain ideas and then we realize that they're wrong, then we correct our thinking. Hopefully most of us do that. So rigid thinking is a kind of unnatural living in the sense that we always want to be updating our ideas, updating our knowledge, and science is a good example of that actually, when it's functioning as it should. So on a physical level, you know, we break down, we catabolize, and we anabolize, and we grow new structures. We grow hair when it falls out. We can regenerate bone, blood cells, white blood cells. So we're constantly
Transforming.
renewing ourselves, transforming ourselves, constantly renewing. So, and then on, let's see here. So I'm going to wait just a little bit. I'm going to introduce the 5 elements first, and we'll get into the sort of psychological death and rebirth process that happens here. So, so that's an aspect of living naturally that most people don't appreciate, right? And living according to the seasons. So in Chinese medicine, you know, there's certain diets, certain herbs, certain things that we do lifestyle-wise during the seasons to attune to the seasons. And beyond that, we can also work emotionally, not only with the seasons, right, as a backdrop sort of that informs our lives during autumn or winter or spring or summer, but also just in the course of our daily lives, so that this yin-yang cycle is a cycle of transformation that happens moment to moment and over millennia, right? As epochs come and go, right? One moment transforms to the next. You know, one thing, you know, an idea can die in a moment and be reborn in the next. A cell can die and is regenerated in the next. A relationship can go for 2, 3, 10, 20 years, and then it can die, right? And ideally, we find relationships with people, with life, with our work, that are sustainable over time so that we can grow into them in a large container, right? So a lot of intimate relationships die because we either change too quickly or we haven't chosen someone that provides a container for this cycle to happen in a robust way. Now, both people have a certain sensibility and proclivity to, you know, not embody the death and rebirth cycle. And maybe they can get through and live a certain life for a while. But this dark side happens. It's just part of life. It wouldn't be part of the symbol if it didn't happen. And you can look just in the simple example of day and night, right? You have day, which is yang, and you have night, which is yin. Okay? So that's nighttime. We go down, we rest, we replenish, we nourish, we dip into our unconscious. Okay? The dreams come out of our unconscious. And during the day, we're active, our eyes are open, hopefully. We're doing things outwardly, right? We're more in our conscious minds. And this symbol can also be viewed as yang represents more of the conscious mind, right? The prefrontal cortex. And this yin down here represents the deeper structures of the brain, the midbrain, the emotional body, and then the primitive or reptilian brain, you know, root instincts are. So that can be viewed this way, or it can also be viewed this way. So the yang is strongest up here, so conscious mind descending down here into the deep unconscious. Okay? And in a way, this little swish can be viewed if we view consciousness this way, right? This is almost like the corpus callosum. Okay? That's the structure in the brain that sort of unites the two hemispheres and creates communication between them. Just like our skin is an interface with the environment. When we get to the emotional transformation part of this, I'll describe this swirl down the middle here as the crack in the heart. The crack in the heart. This.
The little tail. Oh, that.
This, right? That's sort of
Okay.
the crack in the heart. So all
What
that.
do you mean by the crack in the heart?
We'll talk about it, right? So there's the lyric by Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets through, right? So I'll talk about what?
That comes from Rumi.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, it was originally there's a crack in the heart where the light gets through.
Okay. So wherever it comes from, that's the wisdom in it. And part of this talk of transformation is kind of living with, I call it the spirituality of a broken open heart. Right? So that's becoming a person of depth, a person of sensitivity, a person that can hold dialectics, right? Can hold joy and also can hold sorrow. You become a sensitive, like open person through that. And also a person that's affected by what's happening in the world. So we don't live in a bubble. Okay? So living in a bubble and that narrow-mindedness is a yang trait. Yin is much more open and expansive. It takes in the breath. It's the feminine. It's the sacred feminine. So as we're affected by the world, we realize that we're not separate from it. That's actually a pretty profound thing. A lot of people, try to be separate from the world, and for good reason. I mean, there's a lot of shitty things going on in the world today that I personally don't want to experience on a daily basis either and be exposed to because it hurts too much.
Yeah.
So, but to a degree, we want to not be ignorant of the outside world, but we also don't want to be so yin that we just take in everything, right, and become dysfunctional. So there's always balance. So that's another dialectic there. Balance between control and surrender. So another point of yin and yang is that neither one is inherently wrong or inappropriate. They're only appropriate at certain times. And we'll talk about perverse yang, which is yang, deranged yang, and then unhealthy or unintegrated yin. Neither one of those are healthy, but as long as we have healthy, sustainable yin, healthy, sustainable yang, that creates a cycle, right? So control and surrender again. There are times to be in control, time to get things done, time to set boundaries. That's a yang trait. Then there are times to go with the flow and not put up a fight and just kind of go with things. That's a yin trait. You can begin to see now how this symbol is rich to describe the things that we all deal with on a daily basis, right? From our relationships to how we conduct ourselves to how we manage our time to who we give our energy to. And at certain times too, I'm going to pause like right now, almost as if I'm just having a conversation, because so that things can soak in a little bit. And that's also yin and yang. The pause is the yin.
Is it also the off, it's the off switch where the yang is the on switch?
That's right.
Would anybody like any tea?
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a very young offering.
That yonder big teeth.
So are there any questions or anything at this point?
So the metaphors are like almost endless.
Endless. And that's why I go nuts with this. You
Yeah.
know? It's been like 30 years I've been meditating on this.
So
When you put the seasons into it, you can put all the correspondences of the seasons.
That
Then
was
it's
just
just
a whole
it's a bonanza.
kid.
Yes, John.
were you talking about how to experience this experientially rather than just thinking about it?
We've shared some of those things, right? Like in relation relationship, you know, how to, you know, creating boundaries, to be in control, to be in surrender, to be open-minded at times and be closed-minded other times.
Pause.
Mhm.
Listen.
To pause in activity,
Okay.
right? So those are all very practical things. Did you have a particular example that you?
No, it's the part of it that I'm more interested in, so.
The practical aspect.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I invite you to, if it's not practical enough for you, because part of it is just, you know, usually I don't even use that many examples at this point in a discussion like this. It's really just getting the framework first, right? And then
Thank you.
and then we can get into more practicals. I've already actually mentioned several practicals, but I invite you to listen to the dynamics of it, right? And then just you can apply it just to whatever you need to and think about it. All right. So I'll ask some more questions. Where would summer appear on this circle? So if this is a circle and we're going to put the seasons around here, where would summer appear?
At the top.
Say like 11 o'clock.
Most young.
Oh, is it yang or yang?
Summer.
Young.
Yang?
Summer is peak yang. Okay. Where's noontime on here? Noon. High noon. Where's winter?
The opposite of
Well,
summer.
then.
Never knows. Calligraphy artist, would you? Difficult word.
Yeah, these are.
Oh yeah, man. I'm mad problem for teachers.
All right. Where's autumn?
On the
No,
yin
on the
side,
right side.
3 o'clock.
And that's right. Where is winter solstice?
Halfway between autumn and deep winter.
So here,
Wouldn't it be the peak of winter?
Anita, where are you saying?
Is that the peak of winter?
Where's peak of winter on here?
Well, right there, right where winter is.
Yeah, right where winter starts, that's the peak of winter?
Oh, no, in the middle of winter.
Okay, so you say it's over here. Yeah? Okay. Fielding responses. Any other guesses? Educated guesses, hopefully?
I think it's where it says winter.
Yeah, that's what I was originally thinking.
That's winter solstice.
So we're not thinking linearly.
Correct. Which brings up another point. So even though yin and yang is a balance of yin and yang, right? My estimation of this is that this cycle, it is embedded in the primal matrix of the feminine. So if there were, you know, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? I sort of say somehow the egg came first. I don't know how exactly, but like this cycle, because it's a circle especially, and because it's regenerative, containing yin and yang, it is within the cycle of the feminine. So, that's where winter solstice is. Summer solstice is up here, right? Autumnal equinox is over here. Spring equinox is over here. So this is the fire element. Okay, there are 5 elements. The 5 elements comprise yin and yang. Okay, so the 5 elements are sort of a more detailed delineation of yin and yang. Does that make sense? So there are two yin seasons and there are two yang seasons. Right? Each season corresponds with a certain element. Okay? These are called the correspondences of the element. So the correspondences of the fire element are summer, noontime, the color red. There's a planet, I think it's Mars or something, I never paid much attention to it.
Heat is fire.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So temperature is also associated with each element. This is heat up here, the fire. Okay? So we're not, and then there's organs that correspond with each element also. So each element is a constellation of qualities. That's the poetry of it. So the ancients discovered that certain qualities are consistent among certain things. So in summer, what typically happens during summer is it's hot, so it's the fire element that corresponded with the heart organ network, right? The blood, the circulatory system, all these things bear a similar poetry.
Hence the song Hot Blooded.
Yes. Okay. All right, so fire, summer, noon, and the heart organ. Okay. Autumn. Corresponds with the metal element. I should try to write these in a way that you can read them. Sorry. Okay. So the metal element the lung organ. So each element also corresponds with a yang organ, but I'm just going to mention the yin ones for simplicity, because the yin organ is the main organ for each of these. Winter. Okay. Winter corresponds with the water element and with the kidney. Spring corresponds with the wood element and the liver. So you'll notice there are only 4 elements here. Right? Where's the other element? The other element is earth. And the way the 5 elements were first delineated was that earth was in the center. Okay? So that spoke to the psychology of revering the earth and revering and being grateful for what the earth has to offer, because the earth in a sense was central to the life and to the function of the other elements. And then later, I think it was more of an acupuncture kind of application, right? There were many different schools throughout Chinese history, but the earth element came out here. Okay? Whether it's out here, whether it's over here, we can understand it metaphorically. The earth element is actually here, except its phase is actually a little bit of every season. So it's the transition from one season to the next. Earth corresponds with pause and stillness. Okay? So that means that as we transition from life, as you sit down to eat a meal, and you get up to go back to work or to do whatever you want to do, it's nice to pause before you get up and eat. I mean, before you get up and do something else. When you watch a movie, it's nice to sit in the theater and digest the movie. As Ben knows, I'm always the last one to leave the movie theater. I start cleaning up, you know, I'm still there.
Memory
Right?
element, man.
Yeah. So that's the earth element. And so what that means is that as summer happens and then goes into autumn, there's a pause. Right? It's a transition time. So that's because there's an adjustment period. It speaks to adjusting. Right? And it speaks to integration. Okay, so as one phase of life happens, we pause. When a relationship ends, hopefully you pause before jumping into the next relationship.
Does that have anything to do with Indian summer, which is that pause between
Yeah.
seasons?
Yeah. So Earth corresponds with late summer as a season. Okay, late summer is the period at the end of summer, or Indian summer, before autumn begins. So that's one school of thought. Another school of thought is the one I was just describing, that it happens at the end of each season, and it's kind of all of it together, right? So I think that those two schools merged at one point, and the earth element now is understood as late summer, which is like a month or something, whatever it is. I don't know how long late summer is. But it's the end of summer, and it's also that like 10-day period, 7 to 10-day period at the end of each season. So the earth element doesn't have its own slot per se, except at late summer. And then it catches up more days in the transitions between the elements.
So it becomes shorter, the transition period becomes shorter, or no?
No. So the elements, the 5 elements of fire, earth, metal, water, and wood are material things. So the ancient Chinese discovered that in the world, these 5 things are what constitute material existence. Okay, so wood relates to the trees and plants. Fire relates to fire and heat. Earth represents the earth itself and soil. Metal represents the minerals in the ground. So the minerals are condensed earth. So another thing is that this cycle turns towards winter. It's a condensation and an intensification process. Okay, so that's why winter solstice is an intense time. And that's the bottom of the unconscious. Okay, so this is intense. This is a loosening of intensity until you get, right? So it's an intensity that's more outward, right? High noon and summer solstice is intense heat, so it's a different kind of intensity. And this is a deepening interior intensity, represented by the earth element concentrating itself in minerals. And then it said that the minerals, and so each, okay, so this is the transformational process and the regeneration process of the elements, which is consistent with nature. And the problem these days, I'll just touch on this quickly, is that we've totally forgotten the cycle. We don't live in an earth-based culture anymore. And this death and rebirth cycle is out the window, okay? Modern culture lives on this side. It's young. Everything's fast, everything is done, everything is commodified, everything has a purpose, everything is known, everything is about stimulation, excitement. Why do you think there's a sleep deprivation deficit? Sleep is yin. One of the principles of yin and yang is that with an excess of one diminishes the other. So living in a very yang culture, okay, always on the go, always stimulated, yin gets depleted. Okay? As we become more yin depleted, we lose certain faculties. This is a real thing, it's not a theoretical thing. This is another thing I want to mention, is that this yin-yang symbol and these elements are life. It's not a symbol of life, I mean it kind of is, right? But it's not really. Like, this is actually life. This is how it happens. It's not a theory, it's we see it. Night and day happen. Summer happens, autumn happens, winter happens, spring happens. So these are elements and they're also phases. You mentioned that before, phase, right? Okay, you said something about it earlier. Anyway, so the phases mean that these are dynamic qualities. These are always transforming and moving into one another. Okay? Before I went to Chinese medicine school, I avoided Chinese medicine school for years because the 5 elements didn't make sense to me. I was studying Ayurveda at the time, I was into yoga, and I thought, Ayurveda was the shit. That's what it was about. And the 5 elements of Chinese medicine was like wood and metal. It's like, didn't make any sense to me. And I was down at a yoga workshop in Los Angeles with Adil Pakivala, and he was distributing this product called Sunrider Products. And it's a Chinese medicine sort of, formulated packets for different times of day and whatever. And so I started taking these packets, and I really liked them. And I went to this, he had a little meeting, for the Sunrider people. And he handed out this little pamphlet. And in the pamphlet was a description of the 5 elements as phases. And a light bulb went off in that moment for me with Chinese medicine. And I got it. And it all made sense. No one had ever explained to me that these are phases. And as soon as I got that they were phases, it was over. I was sold. So, and it's so beautiful the way it works, so that, okay, let's start at spring. So a lot of times the cycle traditionally starts at spring, because spring is creation, that's newness, right? So on a material level, we have the plants, okay? Plants are burned by fire and disintegrate. Okay? As they disintegrate, they become compost and nourishment for the earth. Okay? As earth persists in the cycle, it concentrates and becomes minerals. Okay? Eventually, the minerals are dissolved into water. Quintessential example of the ocean. Right? The ocean is a correspondence of winter, like the sea, the deep sea. Another correspondence of these elements are colors, right? So the color corresponding with winter is dark blue or black. Okay, so it's the color of the deep sea. Spring is green, fire's red, the one is white, and earth is yellow-orange. Okay, so, right, and then water, okay, not necessarily ocean water, but water, even just mountain water that's dissolved with minerals, right, from the metaphase, nourishes plants again. Okay, so that water comes up into the plants, and the plants grow until they disintegrate again. One second. And up here in summer is peak flourishing. Right? So that's fruiting. So once fruiting happens, the plants naturally go into a decline. So the trees lose their leaves, right? And then appear almost dead in winter. And I'm going to make a little note over here. I'm going to introduce the emotions here next. Okay, so does that make sense?
Not entirely.
What doesn't make sense?
This has always thrown me about the elements.
Okay, bring
Is
it on.
that, first of all, I always wonder why air isn't on there.
Okay, air corresponds with the metal element.
So why isn't air, why is it metal?
That befuddled me for years until I just accepted it. That, that's why I liked Ayurveda, because Ayurveda is air. But it's a different kind of a system. It's a little bit more, I want to say it's a little bit more earth-based. I don't know if I'd stick with that.
Exactly. I don't see a distinction between earth and metal. I think metal would be contained within earth.
It is.
Okay, so
So-
how come air, nothing on earth
Think about
survives
it as-
without air?
Right. But that's the metal element.
Okay, I don't have
In a
the
sense.
enlightenment that
And-
you have with
No.
this.
And ether in Ayurveda corresponds with wood in the liver.
Okay.
Okay? It's a more ethereal quality.
And is there a specific reason that air is absent from this?
I don't know. But air isn't necessarily a constituent of what you find on Earth per se. I mean, it is, but you know, it's kind of an atmospheric thing.
Mhm.
It's necessary for Earth, but it isn't the Earth.
Well, it's necessary for plants.
Yeah.
In a way, we could say that about fire too, right? I mean,
Mm.
fire's not really something that you find just
Yeah.
happening out there.
It's the product of interaction with oxygen, which is in the air, you know, it's fueled by oxygen.
And fire is.
Right, but air's not on here.
No, but fire is a kind of a combination of, you know.
Like
it-
plant matter and air from the metal element. Anyway, they're metaphors.
Okay.
And they're not completely logical, but when you go with it, things are accounted for.
So this, you're referring to like the creation, the creative or cycle
Yeah,
of the
thank you.
elements.
So this is called the creation cycle,
Mm.
or the generation cycle. Okay? This is how life should happen for a sustainable, regenerative society. This is permaculture. This is composting. Okay? This is getting enough sleep and enough waking. This is embodying our difficult emotions as much as we embody our positive emotions. While we're on the subject of air, and I'll just say that, you know, as I was preparing some notes for this, and my recent, my current book that I'm writing is about climate change, and so I was thinking about carbon dioxide. Okay, and we know that oxygen is flammable, right? So oxygen is like pure yang in a sense. Okay. So if oxygen is pure yang, then carbon dioxide is sort of the opposite dialectic of it. Or it could be, but I think it is because there's an interface between human beings and plants, right? We give off carbon dioxide, the plants take it in, they give off oxygen. So the plants keep the carbon, which constitutes their mass. So carbon is the common element linked to living structures. Okay? So there's a dialectic here in a way between humans, which are perhaps a more yang aspect of the animal kingdom, and of flora and fauna, and plants are more yin. Okay? So we have a problem with carbon dioxide, so carbon dioxide is yin. So our current problem is that carbon dioxide is collecting in the outer atmosphere and creating a blanketing which is keeping in heat. And that is a yin quality. Yin buffers, right? It buffers and it creates a barrier because yin is material, yang is immaterial.
Yang is immaterial?
Yes. Yeah. Think about thought. Think about ideas. Think about energy. Think about sun's rays.
You mean it's not solid? It doesn't have. It's not
Right.
visual, and it's not.
It's more on the energetic spectrum of matter and energy.
It's
right?
permeable.
It's a, if you have the
I tend
lower
to think of it as
vibration, which is
feminine,
the
you know,
earth
or
and the
Mhm.
higher
I tend to think of that
thought.
ephemeral things or things that are not substantive as being yin rather than yang.
No, it's
No,
the
it's more
opposite.
feminine, you know, no.
No, material. The material universe is yin.
Mm.
This is the energetic universe.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, you can think about electricity.
Hmm.
Right? Electricity needs a conduit to flow,
Mhm.
right? And it needs a ground, and it grounds at yin in the earth, and its conduit is yin. brings up an interesting example for practicality for John. I'm trying to keep you in mind with the practical examples. In Chinese medicine, there's something called heart mind, which is Shen. Okay, so the beauty is that all this is applied to the medicine. Okay, so Shen is heart, okay, and mind. Mind is more ephemeral. That's the yang part. The heart part is the actual organ. So that's material. So Shen, to be substantial, we want health, we want balance, we want harmony. So there's a yin aspect to Shen and a yang aspect to Shen. Okay? More specifically, the spirit or mind in Chinese medicine is said to be contained in the blood. It's rooted by the blood. So if somebody has floating mind, you dream disturbed sleep, and mania, and anxiety, you want to check the blood, and specifically the heart blood, which is sort of sourced in the liver, but that's a different story. So the heart blood, this feminine aspect, this material feminine aspect, houses the immaterial aspect of mind. It keeps it grounded. It keeps the mind in the realm of earth, well, embodied, right? Otherwise, if the blood is weak, the Shen floats, and that creates disturbances. You know, the mind unable to calm down. Okay? So that's just a little example of how yin and yang move from here into the realm of holistic medicine. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Can I share something?
Mm-hmm.
While you were talking, and when you were talking about the earth and the pause, I was thinking about in our society, we just go from one thing to another. And I have a friend who lived in Belgium, and when he starts the day, it's just a slow, enters it slowly, goes down to the coffee shop and reads, and he just takes his time with things. And at dinner time, he takes the time to light candles, and it's just so different than the way Americans, to really kind of enjoy also just the added richness of candlelight or music in the background, and some sensory experience, but he's not as hurried, like some people get up at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 and go off to work right away and come back home and they got something else to do.
Right.
There's something beautiful about it, and I think it's maybe partly his European sensibility.
Right. I mean, in a sense, I was thinking about this the other day, like coffee, is sort of one of the primary symbols of yang culture run amok, right? Like perverse yang. Coffee is just always on the go, right? Not embracing tiredness. Like, I've never had a cup of coffee in my life.
Really?
Never had a cup.
Whoa.
I've tasted it, it's delicious.
Whoa.
But, it's not like I'm on some rigid thing, like I don't want to drink coffee. It's just never particularly appealed to me to be stimulated like that. So, anyway, I'm usually tired in the morning, and I'm not really a morning person, and I just sort of, wake up gradually. So, anyway, that's the phase nature of the 5 elements, right? That's the transformational nature of the elements. And when we can keep this in mind, we understand regeneration and we have a sustainable model for living. What's happening these days, as I mentioned before, and I'll see what comes out of it this time when I say it, is that we are completely on the yang side. So the sacred feminine has been forgotten. Okay? So part of this presentation is to highlight that, right? So as people and as what we offer and do in the community, to bring back a sense of balance, right? Obviously we can't do this all over the world, but we can do it in our own lives, in our families, and amongst one another, is we can embrace and practice more yin things. Okay? Attuning to someone. So when someone speaks, listening and receiving what they have to say is a yin quality. And I'd say it's a yin pillar. I think it's an extremely important quality to pause and to listen to somebody and to take in what they have to say. Listening is yin, speaking is yang, right? So that's a relationship. When we relate, we speak and we listen. Right? We all know that listening is on the short list these days. Right? A lot of people aren't really around to listen very much because everyone's sped up. Everyone's in their heads. Yang is your head. Yin is your body, your deeper body below your head. Okay? Gathering in community. Yin, see, I was going to follow that outline. I haven't looked at it since the beginning. So it never happens. So anyway.
That's some yin qualities.
What?
That's some yin qualities.
Yeah, it's
Letting it
that's
go.
too much yin. Yeah, I was like, all right, we're going by this thing. So, so community is yin. Okay? The me, I, the selfishness, which isn't necessarily bad. We all have to be selfish. It's when selfishness is an extreme. Okay? So when we have selfishness in extreme in modern culture. So community is yin. Okay? As yang continues to burn, okay, because this is about heat, this is about coolness. As yang continues to burn, as we have corrupt governments in place and horrible environmental policies, horrible healthcare initiatives, healthcare initiatives like equitable healthcare initiatives are on this yin side, right? Actually caring for people, that's yin, right? Care is yin. Okay, so as this continues on the yang side, yin suffers more and more. So the environment will suffer more, we will suffer more, our relationships will suffer more, our families will suffer more. As the environment deteriorates, we're all going to suffer more. That's what's happening. If you look around the globe right now, what do we have going on in California? We have drought, okay? Water is yin. Fire is yang, okay? There's an imbalance. Climate change is about the imbalance of heat, right? So we have extreme drought and extreme floods. So it's yin and yang thrown out of balance. And it's driven by humanity staying on this side of the cycle. This side of the cycle is also the happiness culture.
It's also what?
The happiness culture, right? Like how many books were published on happiness, beginning a few years ago. And so most people are all about pleasure, convenience at any cost, right? Using up resources. Resources are yin. Burning resources. That's excess yang, burning resources. That's why when you go out to the mountains or when you learn herbalism, you learn to pay attention to the plant. Some people ask permission to pick a plant's leaves. I don't think that's so much like the plant actually gives permission, so much as it's a ritual to tune into the plant, to pay attention to it, to establish some kind of reciprocity with it, so you don't pick the plant bare. In Western cultures, picking the planet bare. So as this yang begins to consume more and more of the world, we need each other. We need each other because, I'm going to introduce the emotions soon, because these emotions, all the emotions, will become exaggerated and out of balance. Fire is joy. So by staying on the yang side of this cycle, which is pleasure, convenience, instant gratification as opposed to delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is the yin, is when you include this yin cycle robustly, you get delayed gratification. You learn that things take time, and that time is the time for things to transform. So that when you feel grief, which is over here in the autumn season, okay? And while these are corresponding with the seasons, they come, as I mentioned earlier, they come outside the seasons, and we just experience them at any time in our life. So if someone dies or we experience any kind of loss, grief will hit us. You know, if we're having a healthy response to the environment, grief will hit us. And we understand that when you're in grief, it's not good to pleasure away your grief. Okay? That's not wise. Except in small amounts to recharge. Right? So if we're in grief, it's helpful to have some lightness. It's helpful to have some pleasure and some joy. But it's the degree to which we do that. If we do that to the extreme degree to get rid of our grief, that's where the trouble begins. Whenever we wholesale deny any, and I'm going to put the emotions down. Whenever we wholesale deny any of the emotions, that's where trouble begins. Because that is not allowing that emotion to live through you. And that's part of the emotional intelligence little that Tom pointed out earlier, that we allow emotions to happen, we allow them to pass through, and we allow them to fade or to come back. And there's a certain amount of skillfulness within that, but that's too detailed for right now. So let me just get these emotions down here.
That's
What?
I'll take some tea.
I'll take some tea. What kind is it?
It has Blue Lotus. Everybody else know what else? Rose?
I can take a peek.
Can you guys read this sideways writing?
Fear.
It's, otherwise, I mean, I can get down.
Joy, worry, grief, fear.
Yeah.
Oh, what's the first one?
You
Joy,
could
there-
write vertical, which is Chinese.
Grief, worry, joy. Okay?
Are we missing one? Joy is-
So that's like between
Spring and
anger
summer.
and joy, there should be something, you
No.
have something between all the other
Well, in
ones,
between
no?
there. What?
No? Oh, okay.
For the earth?
So
Yeah.
Earth, just to
Oh, I
show
see.
this, Earth element is this little time in late summer over here somewhere, right?
That we're in right now.
Yeah. So this is late summer over here, okay? And then Earth is also here, here, and here.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's the transition, and it's also like over here too. So, right?
In our, I'm glad you brought that up too, because in our Qigong school, we study from the Taoist tradition, and they see the 5 elements as the 4 elements, but with the earth being the center of them all, because the earth is comprised of all other elements. And they break it down into like personality archetypes. Like you have someone who's a metal personality or wood personality, or we're all a balance of all of them. And they see that like the earth person is like the monk, the one on the path, who is like the balance of all the other elements.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really enjoying the way this kind of comes together, but seeing how, like, wondering how this works in from the TCM standpoint of like that 5-pointed cycle. Is that kind of
That's
what's
the control
hanging
cycle.
around here?
I wasn't going to get into it, but
Oh.
I'll mention it for you in a little bit.
Okay, sure.
All right.
I have a question.
Or hold on one second and just. Right. So just Tom. So that
Sure.
Earth at the beginning earlier, I mentioned
Right.
Earth was originally in the
Center.
middle, right?
Yeah.
And this thing about the classifying people right according to the elements, that's kind of like a takeoff from Ayurveda, right? Pitta, Vata, and Kapha,
Right.
right? Everyone's a
Constitutions.
combination of those. So it's kind of a way. That's one of the strengths of Ayurveda is those doshas,
Right.
right? And seeing that, and that's helpful, right? Just as an overall take, but like a macro view, just like this is a macro view of ourselves and the world. So there's a book. Have you read Between Heaven and Earth?
Not yet.
Okay, so that's by Harriet Beanfield and her husband. I can't remember his name. Anyway, I remember her name. Anyway, between heaven and earth, and that goes into all that stuff. I think.
Cool.
If I remember correctly. Yeah, it does. All right. So, Anita, you had a question?
I guess I'm getting, you've got joy, then you got worry, grief,
Yeah.
fear, and anger.
Yeah.
It's the 5 emotions for the
5 emotions.
elements.
Okay, and
Each-
so this side only has one emotion and that side has 2.
3.
That's just how it is.
Yeah, well, remember that Earth is kind of here kind of arbitrarily. It's more like that's where it's just stuck. You know, it's just don't take it too literally or too seriously. Yeah, because Earth is kind of here, and it's, you know, it's at the end of all these, right?
Okay.
But it was stuck over here for certain practical reasons. I think within like 5-element acupuncture and that sort of thing, it just works in that way, in ways that are way too complicated to get into here. Okay, so just accept it over there. It does correspond with
I
Lacey.
was asking about the emotions because it looks like, well, maybe it's fitting because, I mean, the feminine side, you have worry and grief on the right side,
Yeah.
and the only thing on the left side is the anger. The
Yeah,
other
joy.
side- Oh, that is on that side as well.
That
The
is.
fear is it right directly in the middle at the bottom, is that what it is?
What?
And fear is directly in the middle at the
Yeah,
bottom?
fear's on the yin side, okay? So this yang, okay, although the summer solstice is here, you see how this yang comes over here?
Right,
That means that there's a little bit of yang even in this yin phase. As this yin phase begins, there's still yang at the beginning.
mhm.
Okay? And this winter is like, corresponds to here in a way. Okay? So that's the detail. Alright. So, emotional transformation. Okay? This is, to me, the most exciting and informative and wisdom-rich aspect of this. So, where to begin? So one tenet of emotional depth work, okay, so I have a passion for psychological depth work. Psychological depth work is a lot about going into the shadow, going into the unconscious, going into the depths of the body, okay? So the yin side represents the depth of the body. The yang side represents the superficie and the upper parts of the body. So as this yin cycle progresses down into yin, we have to assume that this is a deepening of consciousness. This is a deepening into the unconscious, which is a deepening of consciousness. Okay? So we have to ask, maybe it's a nice way to enter this by saying, you know, why do we have to deal with the yin side? Why? Well, we have practical examples in our lives. You know, if you don't sleep, you're going to be in trouble pretty soon. Right? If you don't eat, which is taking material, yin, into your body, you're going to be in trouble. If you don't take water in, you're going to be in trouble.
And if you don't breathe.
Yeah, if you don't breathe, with an air element over here,
I
you're
was
going to be in
waiting
trouble.
for that.
Okay?
He's got to get the ear in there.
Right. So this is a deepening. So, okay. My mind is like 20 things going on when I get to this part. So this deepening of the cycle. So depth is equivalent to wholeness. Okay? So let me just write a couple things down here.
What, in a new pen?
It's getting hard to read your pen.
Because it's going in.
No, it's going yang. It's just very ephemeral.
We'll talk about this later.
So the idea of life, psychologically and spiritually, is to enable this process to happen. Okay? As long as we are in the generative cycle, okay, which is death and rebirth, we evolve, we grow, and we integrate. Okay? As we progress through life, we might have terrible things that happen to us. Very difficult things. Grief represents the difficult things that happen to us. Because usually we become injured and we bear pain when we lose something. We lose all kinds of things throughout life. That's the nature of life. Okay? So there are many different spiritual perspectives and religious perspectives, and even Buddhism says, don't get too attached, stay back. And that's helpful to a degree. But I don't agree with some of the Buddhist precepts that encourage us to be more unattached than might otherwise benefit us in ways that had to do with this generation cycle. This dark side emblazons compassion and empathy in us. Okay? It emblazons sensitivity and a we or a collective consciousness.
A what?
Collective consciousness. If you've ever been in the depths of grief, there's a feeling that I've had there where you feel like your heart breaks open and you become the world. It's like a heart broken open as wide as the world. Right? That is an initiation. That's an initiation into collective we-ness, not just me-ness. Okay? So as we go through life, we might go through one revolution of death. Okay? So from grief, grief is the experience of pain. And I call this cycle and coming out of grief, dying to our pain. Right? So in one of my articles in my writing, I have sections that say pain is guru. Right? Pain is a teacher. When we allow pain, what are the things that we do to not allow pain? We jump over here onto the yang cycle, we try to pleasure it away. We try, addiction is over here on the yang cycle. Okay? All these things are a denial and a deprecation of yin. So when we can embrace this yin side, we cure a lot of things by default. When you can be with your pain and learn to be with your pain, you don't need to do these perverse yang things to get rid of it. You don't need to be overstimulated. You don't need to be busy all the time because you're too afraid to be with yourself. You don't have to run away from silence and quiet. Okay? You don't have to consume and try to fill the void inside with things. Okay? Our society is completely deficient in the emotional intelligence of the yin side. That is the problem. There's a beautiful quote in that page that I gave you guys. It's the last quote. It's by Robert Jensen. And maybe we'll try to read it soon, or someone can read it soon.
We can speak. Would you want us to read it?
No, right now. So when we deny this side, we have no choice because humans hate to suffer and hate to bear a meaningless life. We try to create meaning, and that meaning comes superficially. That's what we have in first world culture. We have too many people running around trying to fulfill their lives in the yang cycle. Okay? Fulfillment, to be fulfilled is a yin thing. Right? Remember, it's material. It's the body. Okay? There's a saying in Chinese medicine, or one of the dictums or whatever, that says the heart, okay, which is up here, the heart is the monarch of the 6 yin and 5 yang organs. So the heart encompasses all the other organs. When I saw that, when I was in Chinese medicine school, I had as much of an interest in the yang aspect of it as I did the yin aspect of it. Yin is like disease, difficulty, brokenness, like all these difficult things. So when you go to medical school, you learn how to treat what's broken. There's also some, that's why it's called wellness practice. You learn wellness, like how to balance all of this, right? I was particularly interested in this symbol of wholeness. To me, this represents, and it does represent, living a wholehearted life. When we understand that the heart encompasses all the other organs, which basically encompasses this whole symbol, we understand what it means to be in the heart. We can call that love. Okay? But that love is not just a feeling, right? It's not just a good feeling. That love is love in action. That love is self-sacrifice. That love is service. That love is deepened by grief. Grief and love exist on a continuum like this. I have a poem that I wrote years ago, and it's like an art piece, a visual art piece, and it says, to grieve is to love is to grieve is to love is to grieve. Right? Each one of those, like yin and yang, engenders the other, builds the other. So when we appreciate this cycle, what we do is we gift ourselves clear yang. What muddies up the cycle is when we repress these things. And all too commonly, we don't repress our joy. Right? We don't repress our light. Sometimes we do. Okay? That's different. More often, we repress the difficult things. We try to get away from them. And when we do that, that creates a back pressure in the body of pain. So that we carry around pain in our body that's condensed like the minerals of earth. Like the minerals of the metal element. So that's where grief happens, right? So that compression in us crystallizes, condenses, blocks us. And it blocks our yang. So that our yang becomes superficial. Okay? I see this all the time in people that present as very loving and caring people, but when push comes to shove, they're gone. We read this on Facebook all the time, right? Like, gee, I thought I had all these friends, and now I'm having this horrible time. Where are all my friends? All the friends don't know how to be there. That's why they're not there. And that is a showing, it's like a sampling of what our culture is about. When you pass through and are initiated into your own grief cycle, into your own yin cycle, your own death cycle that rebirths you, then it's a gift for you and the other person to hang out with somebody who's suffering. That's why compassion and empathy are born over here.
It's like we need more poor weather friends.
Exactly. Yeah.
I got all of you.
Okay? So anxiety and depression. Anxiety is the #1 mental illness in the country. Depression is #2. Anxiety is an extreme form of yang. So anxiety, which I've been through years ago in an unhealthy way, so sometimes, I want to say that this cycle, when this cycle goes like this, it's painful, but as long as we're grieving, as long as we have like a metaphorical death happening, we're on a healthy cycle because there's rebirth that comes from this. So that means that in spring, which corresponds with the eyes and creativity and vision, okay, that vision, that creativity, and that outwardness that comes out of the yin cycle is infused with wisdom. Okay, so you get empathy over here, you get compassion over here, and you get wisdom. Okay? Wisdom comes from going through the trenches. A good part of wisdom does.
What would be the opposite of wisdom, the other side?
Ignorance. Dishonesty.
Is wisdom the yang?
Wisdom is yin.
Wisdom is
Wisdom is yin. So what happens is that wisdom then, when we develop wisdom through our grief, through our heartbreak, okay? So this is the spirituality of a broken open heart. I'm into embodied spirituality. Spirituality for me is nowhere in the ethers. It's not in God, it's not in heaven, it's not anywhere. It's right here in everyday life. Life is full of enough problems to make us as spiritual as we ever need to be. Okay? The reason we don't hang out in the spirituality of everyday life is because it hurts. And because a lot of New Age spirituality and other spirituality is just jumping out of the boiling pot into, well, I shouldn't say the boiling pot again, but you know what I mean. You know, jumping out of the freezing pot, you know, into the nice warm water. And that stuffs that side, that denies that side. Okay? So we end up with a superficial culture. And that superficial culture is all about this moment. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And it believes, and it's also a dishonest culture, because it believes that the Earth's resources are perpetual and everlasting. And that's not true, and we're already beginning to discover that. There's a finite amount of oil. There's a finite amount of resources. And as we imbalance this more and more, as the planet heats up, as the oceans heat up, as the fish die, as marine life dies, everything is changing on the planet right now. And the trouble is starting, right? This gets to be very wobbly. Okay, so I was talking about anxiety and depression before. Anxiety and depression are on the rise, not only because of Donald Trump, but because of everything that's happening. Okay, so anxiety on this, in this paradigm, it's not an emotion that we particularly want to embody and accept like we do the others. We want to accept our joy, we want to accept our worry to a degree as long as it doesn't turn into unregulated anxiety. We want to embrace our grief as long as it doesn't go into depression. We want to embrace our fear, which are realistic fears, not unrealistic fears. Hopefully we'll get to that. We want to embrace our anger to a degree, not let it completely overrule us. And we want to embrace our joy, but not stick to joy as if it's the only thing around. Okay, so right, anxiety and depression. So anxiety is extreme yang. It's like yang gone off the rails. So it's no longer on this continuum of regeneration. Anxiety, especially prolonged anxiety and anxiety disorders, derail us. We're just outside the picture. Okay? So there's kind of a different death and rebirth that happens with that. Like when you get through it and you survive it, you learn certain things, right? But it's different than this. It's not something that you particularly want to go through a lot because it doesn't really have a lot of these really remunerative qualities of the dark yin and the sustainable yang. And then depression is yin gone off the tracks.
What if you have both?
Well, you usually do have both, and that's why you have both, because yin and yang are interdependent. Okay, so we can look at neurochemistry through the lens of yin and yang and understand that as yang becomes more deranged, so will yin. So if we're experiencing a lot of anxiety, chances are we're going to experience some depression soon, and vice versa. And that's true. Most antidepressants address anxiety and depression. So if we repress our grief, and you repress grief, it creates like compressed darkness inside, and it becomes depression. Or it pops up on the other side as anger. Okay? Part of grieving is going through anger. Like we're pissed off that whatever hurt us did so. There's an anger part, like this happened to me. Okay? So you repress the yin side, and it goes underground and pops up as deranged anger, violence, and corruption. Acting out per the dictum, hurt people, hurt others. Okay? If you repress your anger, it pops up on the other side as depression. right? There's the saying. One aspect of depression is anger turned inward, or anger turned onto oneself. So that's a way that we can view the reciprocity of yin and yang with mental health and with emotional intelligence. Okay? So, life is meaningless without yang. Life is meaningless without joy. Okay? We all want joy. But the idea is not to cling to joy any more than we want to cling to our grief. The idea is that happiness is a slice of the pie. It's not the whole pie. And if you like to eat a lot of dessert and binge on dessert all the time, chances are that's
You become diabetic.
yeah, you become a diabetic, that's great, which is a yin disease in Chinese medicine. But it's also, chances are, you're denying your grief or your sadness or dealing with difficulty, right? That's when you see comfort food and these kinds of things that give us that immediate gratification, but not the prolonged gratification. Sugar is a quick fix, protein is a longer fix. So, as we go through life, usually it begins with care. Okay? Like you care about life because you have happiness, which is great. You know, I care about you, and I care about you, and I care about you. And then something happens to you. And I get sad about that, right? So that happens with this heart. Okay? So this little heart here of the fire melts the little heart. Remember how I said the whole symbol's a heart also? That's the bigger heart. That's the monarch heart. That's the spirituality of the heart, mind. Okay? This crack that begins with joy is when joy begins to fade. Okay? I'm just going to go through a little of this and then we'll take like a little quick break or something and then reconvene. So as joy begins to fade, worry comes up. It's like, oh, whoa, I'm not happy anymore. Something's happening to me. Something happened to my friends. Something happened to my family. Something happened to the mountain. Something happened to the river. Okay? So this is where the heart begins to crack. Right? Begins to crack. By the old Rumi or Leonard Cohen, line. That's where the light comes in, right? But it doesn't feel like it. It feels like this is not where the light comes in. This is where the light goes out. And it's true. The light does go out. But like in the depth of winter, right? Those roots are still alive. Something is coalescing in the dark and in the wisdom of winter that gets reborn in the young. Okay? So it takes a tremendous faith to live into the yin and trust it, and to go down and have your light dim, and to go down that process of dying through our pain. Because the way to clear pain in the body so we don't carry it around as suffering through our lives is to grieve it. Grief clears pain, emotional pain, and physical pain sometimes. Because sometimes physical pain is because we're not being wise with our emotions. So we begin to worry, and I call this the place where the earth cracks. It's the earth element, and it's the worry, and it's the place where our joy begins to fall apart a little bit, and we have concern. That's where our heart cracks. Earth equals heart equals body. Okay? This is the whole body. This is the whole earth, and this is the whole heart. Okay? So the earth element is where we begin to crack. And as we crack more, we go into grief, where we break open to grief. Grief is a yin. Yin is descending, yang is ascending. Yin takes us down and in. Inward is yin, down is yin. Outward and up is yang. So as we move into grief, we're broken open. And that's what a broken heart is. Okay? And it doesn't feel like any light is there. And it feels like the worst thing. And we go through this and we hear, and we hear about the hero's journey, and we hear about the myths, and I think Persephone, embodied this lesson somehow. That as we go into the broken heart, we break open, and that connects us to the world, and it deepens us as people. And it deepens our connection to life itself. And we learn lots of things down there. We learn things intellectually, and we learn things emotionally. Those things we don't have to do with our mind. We just are changed. When we go through this yin cycle, we're changed. And when you come upon someone in your life that's been through difficult times and lived through those times and managed to keep their heart open, okay? If you can keep your heart open through heartbreak, then you become a healer. And there's a quote on that sheet that I gave you from Matthew Fox about becoming pain's emissaries, or becoming pain's emissaries or pain's healer instead of its victim. Right? So becoming pain's victim is to fall apart over here and to close your heart and try to jump over here. And when you jump over here, you deny yourself this whole wholeness. You deny yourself your fullness, your humanity, and your ultimate goodness. So when you come across someone that's lived through those things with an open heart, you can sense them. You know when you meet somebody that's been through difficulty and survived, that they can hang out with you. And they're not trying to fix you. Right? Fixing is yang. Being with is yin. Brings up another point about the difference between physical healing and emotional healing. Physical healing, when you hurt yourself, you kind of want to do the opposite. You get a cut on your arm, you want to close it up. You break a leg, you want to fix it and put it back into place, and that's appropriate for yang. With yin, you don't want to fix it. You want to allow it. You want to allow your grief to flow. Okay? So as we go through life and we lose things and we're hurt and we go through pain and we go through devastation, this is a fun part of this, is that this whole thing becomes three-dimensional. Right now it's kind of two-dimensional, right? It's transformative. It gets three-dimensional as a spiral when we understand that this cycle happens through every loss. So through every cycle that we go through in this way, it deepens. So maybe by the time we're 20 years old and we had a really bad heartbreak, high school sweetheart or something like that, or, our grandparent has died, or, our pet has died or something, we might go through this cycle. But it happens like at this level, right? So that we become like this much of this. Does that make sense? I know it's hard because I'm switching between two-dimensional and three-dimensional, but it's almost like we become this, okay? We become like, if this is the fullness of life, okay? If this is like a maximal sort of wisdom and embodiment and compassion and empathy and oneness with the world, by the time we're 20, maybe we're this much, like we have a little bit, right? So on a 3D visual, that would be like the spiral has just begun. So like if you go back behind this diagram, there'd be like a little turn, okay?
So it's like a vortex going out?
Yeah, down.
Down, okay.
Down, kind of down and up and out. It's like we have a little transformation. It's like a little badge of honor. Like I'm 20 years old, and I've suffered a little bit, and here's my badge. And it's like this big, right? And by the time you're 40 or 30, you've gone through more heartache, and then maybe this becomes like this. Maybe by the time you're 40, you've gone through a little more and it becomes like this. By the time you're 50, you're down here. And by the time you're older, like you've become an elder. So if we deny this side, we deny our eldership. Is it any wonder that we're short on elders? Is it any wonder that there aren't many elders in government? Is it any wonder that?
Trump's pretty old.
Yeah, he's old, right? So,
It's like he's not much of an elder.
so,
He's the opposite.
He's just old.
He's just
so
old.
while I'm emphasizing this yin sign, I mean, that's what happens, okay? So most of us, now there's some people that can't accept joy, and they can't accept goodness, and they can't, but that's usually because of a problem originating underneath in the yin, right? It's usually because of trauma or because of, abuse or something, and a sense of worthlessness that you can't receive and you can't, have goodness in your life. So the yang is just as important as the yin, because without that, remember I began that cycle by talking about joy, like that's where it begins. Like if you don't have care, if you don't have joy, if you don't have happiness, you can't even begin that cycle. Like you're just stuck in that cycle.
Now he's getting into childhood development.
So this joy, when it cycles through here and then it comes back up in the spring, is greater joy. So your joy might have been like this, but when it comes out this way and you have wisdom, it's not only joy and happiness, but it begins to have that sense of fulfillment. So that what that means on a planetary level is that when we have yang, when we have actions in the world, and we have policy, and we have regulations, those have to be informed by wisdom. Right? That wisdom's over here. If we have a culture and people that deny wisdom, we get stupid action. We get destructive action. We have action that forgets about the earth and forgets about the heart and forgets about care. So it's imperative that we embody this dark side that's not witchy, that's not the devil, that's not automatically depression. It's just part of a healthy cycle on every level. This is where compost is made. This is where humus is made for the forest. This is where things decay. I like to juxtapose or liken soil bacteria to grief. Like if you think about soil bacteria happen in the earth, like grief, like the metal element, right? Soil bacteria break down what's no longer good. So pain, we ultimately don't need pain. We don't want to have pain around. So what metabolizes pain is grief. And it's like the soil bacteria that metabolize what's no longer good into nourishment. So at the end of the cycle, we have nourishment. We have nourishment in our psycho-spiritual resources, in our wisdom, empathy, compassion, even in our courage. Courage corresponds with the yang side, especially fire. Right? So, I don't know exactly where I was there. So, all right.
Soil bacteria being part of the
yeah, thank you. So the soil bacteria over there, that's rich soil. And if you look at Big Ag, what does Big Ag do? Big Ag just burns out the soil. It doesn't understand permaculture and composting and enriching the soil and bugs. I mean, bugs are supposed to be sanitized just like germs are, right? So it's this perverse yang attitude that is frying the planet.
It understands money.
It understands money. Everything's commodified. That's why it doesn't value. Nothing is sacred. There's another quote by Joanna Macy that's on that little sheet there that I gave you. So anyway, so that's just this beautiful analogy between soil bacteria and grief, right? And if you can think of both of those and how important both of those are for a rich life, it makes sense.
I don't think I can tell somebody's grieving the correlation between that and soil bacteria. It's just,
Yeah, well,
it's just not going to fly.
Just
Depends.
have to embrace the yin with them and be there with the grief, I guess.
So anyway, so part of this grief process is not only grieving something when it's lost, but from my own experience, it's going through grief work. I differentiate grief sort of from grief work, which is going back and looking at your life and trying to make sense of your childhood and grieving the love that we didn't get. Right? So the ways we weren't appreciated. When I was in therapy in my mid-20s for a few years, I went through this tremendous death and rebirth process that was an initiation in my life that changed my life. I mean, I cried for like 2 years. I cried so much during that time, much more than all my life put together. And that process ended because I cleared out this pain that was in my body. Okay? So it's called clearing out the heart. Okay? So the whole thing is the heart. So when you go through a profound rebirth process, you clear yourself of pain because grief does that. It clears out the pain in your body. And it makes you excited and passionate, right? So this is the side of excitement, illumination, inspiration, passion, courage, all the things that really make life worth living. But we just have to be patient. We have to be wise enough that even though that's what makes life worth living, this makes those things possible. So the things that we can do in our lives to kind of bring yin together is we can rest, we can take care of ourselves, we can listen to each other, we can come together, we can eat good food, we can treat the land appropriately. And perhaps most importantly, which I talk a lot about in my new book on climate change, is that it's sad what's happening to our world. Because we can do our little thing here, and we can have our circle here, and part of that circle needs to understand what's happening on a worldwide level. That's not good. And I personally don't think we're going to be able to change it around unless some absolute miracle comes up. But a lot of those miracles are this yang side magical thinking. It's like, let's not acknowledge all the shit that's happened. And let's just try to stay positive, right? So since the Industrial Revolution, we've been doing what I call raiding the pantry. Like, we have this, and it can be symbolized in like a big flash of fossil fuels, right? That we have this tremendous abundance, this amazing explosion in technology and medicine and healthcare, even though it's unfairly distributed. But this is all like a brief moment in time. It's a brief moment in time, and we're destroying the earth that has taken millennia and millions of years to build itself up.
Just to be clear, the earth isn't going to go away, we are.
Well,
The earth
we
will
might do
recover.
some great damage to the earth. You know, one is
I
like
know what you're saying.
We're not.
The earth is regenerative.
it is, but on the scale that happens, who knows? And that's a different different thing.
Sorry.
But that's okay. So I just want to finish this thought that what's really important, especially now about community, is that we have a place to hold this with one another, that we are awake, that we're not so far into this yang positivity, happiness thing that we're stupid and don't see what's happening around us. That's like the frog that sits in the pot that's boiling. It doesn't get out because the changes aren't happening fast enough to make it jump, right? So, but there's nowhere to jump to here. So a big part of coming together in community, which is a really vital yin aspect, is this space to be able to hold what's going on, to be able to hold space for that, and not to be ignorant, actually to encourage one another to acknowledge what's happening on the planet. And not to jump into miracle ideas as a justification to just ignore it all. I can just ignore everything that's happening because technology's going to come up with a great plan. You know, one of the things I learned from having my house taken and my farm taken in Hawaii by the lava is that I still don't believe it. Like, it happened months ago, I still just don't get it. And I think there's certain things in life, like maybe having, God forbid, you know, a child die or something like that we just never quite totally get that. And one of the takeaways is I realized that the oddest, worst things can happen at any time. And they can happen to us. And it happened to me. And it's the same way that we have trouble visualizing and accepting our own death. You know, like we're all going to die. And yet, for us to really grok that that's actually going to happen is really difficult. And what's neat is that every yin cycle, every rebirth cycle is like a little death. And it shows us that, wow, I'm vulnerable. And if we do it wisely and we do it consciously, it prepares us for death. And it concentrates and focuses and distills our lives into what's meaningful to us. So I'll pause there. Can someone just quickly read the quote? I can read it, but it'd be nice if someone else read it. Just the last quote, I think it's the last one by Derek Jensen.
Okay. When I speak of these climate changes or struggles, people invariably call me a downer and too negative. I used to believe that was true, that I was being depressing by pushing these issues, but I've come to see that the claim inverts reality. In fact, I'm the positive one. By placing my faith in our collective ability to bear the truth that is beyond bearing, I am affirming the best aspects of our humanity. Those who demand that we ignore the painful questions are, in fact, the downers. The people stuck in negativity, the ones who have no faith in themselves or others to face reality honestly. Robert Jensen.
And so he's writing about climate change, and this was a wonderful article that he did. I was really struck by this, and it's exactly what I was just talking about. And I'm just going to read it once more because it bears repeating. So he's talking about the atrocities of climate change, what's happening on the planet. When I speak of these, okay, I put climate change in there. When I speak of these struggles, people invariably call me a downer and too negative. Okay? We all experience that. When you talk about something negative, right? It's like people don't want to hear it.
They shut you down.
They shut you down, they go away, they stop
Bypass,
listening.
yeah.
Bypass, right?
Exactly.
Because this is deficient. Okay? I used to believe that was true. I used to believe that I was a downer, that I was being depressing by pushing these issues. But I've come to see that that claim inverts reality. Right? It inverts reality because reality is something else. In fact, I'm the positive one. He's the positive one because he has faith in the yin cycle. He has faith in facing the darkness of life. And he knows that only by facing it and embracing difficulty, that's how you get out of it. And with climate change or with policy, you get out of it because you have wise action, you have wisdom infusing action instead of childish action, okay? This is immature. That's why this is little up here. That's why this is a little circle. It's because it's immature. Not in a pejorative sense, just because in a factual sense. And when you become an elder, you become wise. And that's why traditional cultures had elders, people who have been through stuff. And shamans have to go through stuff. That's why you have initiation. There's something I call sacred permission. Sacred permission is the permission to act in the world after you've been initiated through wisdom. Okay? So all of our leaders, ideally, like in old times, should have to go through this cycle many times so that they have wisdom. Otherwise, how do they know what to do in the world? How do they know what to do with the earth? Because they've ignored their own body, they've ignored their own depth, and they don't have wisdom, and they don't have compassion, and they don't have empathy. Right? So Robert Jensen is saying that, I'm the positive one, I'm the yang one, I'm the positive one, because I have faith in the negative. Rilke says, I have faith in the knights. In fact, I'm the positive one by placing my faith in our collective ability, right? So our collective ability to hold grief and to hold sadness and to support each other through it. Our collective ability to bear the truth that is beyond bearing. Hey, like those impossible things that we don't think can happen, that actually happen. I am affirming the best aspects of our humanity. Right? The best aspects are what you learn from that and the way that you can act positively and be a positive force in the world and be a mature person and a responsible person. Those who demand that we ignore the painful questions, the yin side, are in fact the downers. Right? So if you deny the yin side, you have no faith in alchemy. You have no faith in healing. You have no faith in the regeneration cycle. You have no faith in half of life. The people stuck in negativity. They're in fact the downers, the people stuck in negativity. So what's amazing is that when you deny this, you get stuck there. Okay? And there's a quote by Jung on the sheet too. You know that what we deny comes back to us as fate. Like our fate is that we're stuck there. So in a sense, collectively, we're stuck here. And we act like we're over here. We're over here for the most part, but we pretend that we're here. And part of that pretend is the Industrial Revolution and all the prosperity that we have. It makes us think that, wow, we're doing so well.
Where's denial fit in?
The people stuck in it, the ones who have no faith in themselves or others to face reality honestly. And that speaks for itself. Where's denial fit? Denial fits in anywhere. Like, I mean, the whole process, we can deny
Is it
the
is
dark
it being
side.
stuck? Is that what denial is?
Yeah, it's being stuck, it's being superficial. Right? It's being partial. So if we deny our anger, you know, I mean, there's, on my outline, I didn't get to it tonight, but I have the emotions and then the positive aspects that come out of that. So one good thing, for example, I'll just do anger. One good thing that comes out of anger is learning how to set boundaries. Anger protects what we love. Like if you're not pissed off that someone's hurting what you love, then you have a problem. You know, it doesn't mean that you need to go beat somebody up, but it means that this is a call to action. So anger, so if we can't feel our anger, we're going to let whoever do whatever they want to what we care about. That's part of activism. There's a whole other thing I had about activism too, and how activism, it's important to have grief and anger. Because if you're an activist and you're just angry, right, and you're just out there busting up the world, I mean, maybe that's okay on a certain level, but you're probably going to overshoot it because unless you can also grieve, which is the yin counterpart of that, unless you can feel your sadness, that softens the anger and informs it. It gives anger skillfulness so that you know how to go and act in the world, how to be angry, how to affect things without destroying more things. Right? And if you just have grief without anger, then you just implode. You just stay at home and you do nothing. So these two are like a dynamic duo for activism, right? For speaking up in the world, for feeling things, right? Which is the yin aspect. So you feel the injury and then you activate to do something about it. But that action is informed by the wisdom and the compassion and the empathy developed in the yin state. So you can deny any part of the cycle. And like when you deny your anger, it's like this. It's like this, you know, chunk that's taken out of you. You know, when you take that chunk out, it's like you don't have that. That's a resource. Every bit of this circle is a resource. So when we deny, you know, this over here, you know, then that just chunks up the cycle. That just gunks up the machinery. So there's a whole other part that I had outlined about honesty, right? Intellectual honesty and emotional honesty. Emotional honesty is acknowledging how we feel, what we feel, naming it, processing it, expressing it respectfully, receiving whatever message we can. This is on the little sheet I handed out. Receive whatever message we can, integrate it, pause, and then respond. Unless, of course, our life is imminently in danger, then we can just, do what we have to do to survive. Okay? Intellectual honesty is, like Robert Jensen said, it's facing reality, facing what's true. Okay? We have there's a quote on there too by Jung. Now all these quotes are like coming to light, right? There's a quote on there by Jung that humans will do anything no matter how absurd to deny themselves. We do not become conscious by imagining figures of light, but by making the dark conscious. Making the unconscious conscious. Right? That's what he's talking about. And we have so many ways in our world to avoid this. And that's the problem. We have religion, right? Not that religion was intrinsically wrong, but there are lots of magical beliefs in religion. We have superficial spiritualities. We have spiritualities that come from the East, like through yoga, which is basically light-oriented, which has kind of been bastardized in the West to believe that, we should just be happy or at peace all the time. And that's a big crock of shit. If you're at peace all the time, you may not have much peace when the bulldozers come to your backyard. Or maybe you'll be so numb or in such denial that you won't even care, but the people around you might care, and the birds in the trees might care. And then we have consumerism, right? Another thing to just distract ourselves. We have constant entertainment and constant stimulation, constant noise. I think we've just lost this. And this is consistent too with, how the feminine and how women have been subjugated, for centuries, thousands of years. Right? This scares the shit out of people. This is scary. It's scary to go into the feminine. This is vulnerability. This is defensiveness. There's a time to be defensive. If someone's like getting too much in your face, you want to be defensive. If you're about to fall apart and go into a nervous breakdown, you want to be a little defensive. You don't want to, overlap on that. You want to be able to titrate your feelings, which is part of the emotional intelligence thing. Learning how to allow the time for things to pass.
So you don't think that if you accept everything that happens, just as okay, you could avoid grief? Just a normal cycle of things doesn't mean you don't take action, but it's right now the bulldozer is coming, and I'll take whatever action to avoid it, but I don't have to feel that angry about it or want to grieve.
I've thought about that a lot, and I've been presented with that argument a lot, and it's sort of a Buddhist perspective. And I say this to test it, right? I mean, it's easy to theorize these things, but if I said, chop off your finger right now, I don't want you to do that, of course, but if I said that, is that something that you would do? Or drive your car off the cliff? Or burn your house down? I mean, is that something that you would just do because it's okay? And you're not going to, I could care less. You see, I think that's the critical thinking part.
Yeah, I think the grief in dissatisfaction is from us believing that it should be some other way. That's my perspective.
Right, that's a very young perspective. So with the example I just gave you, would you do those things?
Why would I?
Because it doesn't matter. I mean, if you have a house or don't have a house, it doesn't matter. Right? Because things are the way they are.
No, you can have preferences for certain experiences without grieving that you don't have them.
Well, it's not grieving that you don't have them. It's that those examples that I gave would probably cause you grief and pain.
Definitely pain.
Definitely pain.
You cut your finger.
Right. And you can't have that kind of, that's a physical pain, but you might also have some sadness with that. We can debate this for like probably half an hour or something, and I've done it before for hours. But it comes down to being honest too. Like honest. We are human beings. For all we know, we're here once. What matters at the end of the day to us is usually that we're healthy, that our family's well, that our backyards are well tended to, and that the mountains and the rivers around us are doing okay. And to deny that, to say, whatever happens to those things, I'm okay. I think that's just a philosophical sort of bent that one can take or not. And I think it's really important to be really honest with oneself. Am I really okay with them strip mining the mountain behind my neighborhood? Am I really okay with them dumping toxic metals in the river over here that affects, my garden and my health and my neighborhood?
That's not what I'm saying though. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying it's better and healthier to not be in despair or grief about it. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
It's not okay. I'm not
But
saying.
to what degree? Maybe it's a matter of degrees. It's like none of us can, I said this at the beginning, none of us can take on all the griefs of the world. Right? That's too much. We become dysfunctional. But to what degree do we want to hang out in this pristine youngness, where nothing really affects us? Is that really helpful? Is that really sustainable? Is that really good for our lives and our families and our communities? One second. So sure, we can't care about everything, but there's a spectrum, and I think it's really important to care enough. What I've found is that the more that one accepts this and accepts one's own pain and clears out one's own pain, the more one is able to accept the reality of the world and more of it.
I lived in that area, and my experience was I would just stay in that area. I like the other areas better.
Well, we all kind of do, right?
Yeah.
But
And I think it's better for the whole too. Because when I'm feeling joy, I'm taking care of all the bad things.
right.
On some level, on the deepest level, energetically. That's my perspective.
Okay. All right. Well, we could get into the nitty-gritty of that, but anyway, and this, like I said at the beginning, is kind of about growth. That's the presupposition, because I've had these discussions before. That's why I said at the beginning, the presupposition of this is not to stay in some constant state, of like removed, detached awareness of things. It's to embody life, right? This whole symbol, this whole lens is an embodied life. This is to care about life, to get involved in life, to go through the grit as well as the bliss. And there are lots of other ways to be. I just think that those ways are too much over here, and they reflect what's destroying our world. And I care about the world.
I think the degree to which you love and care about the world is going to determine your actions.
Yeah,
So
that's
if
why.
you don't love the
Yeah.
planet, if you don't love the world, you're gonna go completely imbalanced, young.
Right. And what happens is that's why I began the cycle of joy, that it takes joy to go through this. But once you go through that once, you have this much more, and you have more joy, and you have more care. And then you can go through a bigger circle of it. Right? So the more that you care, the deeper you're going to go over here. And
So what creates care
we just have it.
or not?
To varying degrees, how we were raised, the kind of support that we have, the way our brains are
Education.
formed, education. Lots of things create care.
I think we
And-
have a natural just as innate in us. Care is innate, right?
What's that?
That's the
Care is innate?
capacity.
Yeah,
Care.
it is innate. It's a mammalian characteristic, right? We nurture our young. We care about our young. We care about our offspring. We have emotions. We have midbrain.
So we're basically talking about degrees of balance and imbalance here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it kind of comes down to.
Yeah.
If we're imbalanced, you're going to have a lopsided situation. It's like It's like a tennis ball that would be weighted more on one side than the other
Right.
side. It's not gonna roll right.
Right, it
It's
doesn't.
gonna wobble.
Yeah, that's what this is. That's why these chunks kind of represented those wobbles.
Right.
You know, when we deny part of it.
Right.
One thing, you know, I used to, in one of my writings, I talk about an apple. Like, the apple that you enjoy in summer, you enjoy it because of this cycle. Because of the autumn and the winter and the spring and the maturing of the apple. Without that, you can't have the apple. So that's why there's this. Like, when you're over here and you just stay in this young cycle, like, your joy is not very great. Nor is your sadness very great. And that's like Khalil Gibran's poem, right? On Happiness and Joy. You can read On Happiness and Joy by Khalil Gibran. And he says this. And Albert Camus, who I think I put on the sheet there, he says, in the depths of winter, in the depths of winter, in the depths of the worst darkness, I finally realized in me, something like, in me, an invincible summer. Meaning that his invincible summer is the faith that Robert Jensen talks about, which is the faith to go through this and to become human.
But at the same time, I think that, to your point, I think most people seek pleasure, avoid pain. You mentioned that earlier. And so I think people, that's the push. You know, when you're in the yin, you want to push through it to find the joy again.
Yes.
And you have to have a bit of faith that when your mother dies, you don't have this philosophical debate if you're going to be in grief. Grief is the other side of love. You know, you're just there.
Right.
And you have to have faith and get through it to be able to find that joy again.
You have to have will.
Right.
Yeah.
Without the will.
Right. And I talk, you know, people have accused me too of like being too in love with pain, and I'm not at all. I don't really like pain. Right? So I'm not saying go seek pain. I'm saying when it comes and knocks on your doorstep, as it does throughout life, you better open the door and invite it to sit in. Like the Rumi poem.
One of the principles of Chinese medicine that I would call is they say embrace the yin. So it's not that you want to waller in it, you know, you just embrace it and allow it to be with the grief or the worry or what it is, you know. And see it, try and be in the center of the earth with it, right?
Yeah, to hold it. The earth holds.
So it's about responding. How do we respond to what happens?
Mm-hmm.
Either we're gonna go with the flow, which would be to hang out and go into yin when this stuff happens, or we spiritual bypass and hang out in yang
Mm-hmm.
and not allow the event to permeate us.
Right. To be changed.
To
And
be
that's
changed.
also, you know, on my emotional intelligence thing, you know, allow your emotions to change you.
Right, and I'm
You
sure
know,
a lot of
but
people,
not get the best of you.
I'm sure a lot of people don't think that going to those dark places will change you for the better.
Exactly.
They-
That's the lack of wisdom. So we've written about that too in articles. It's like, what gives us that faith to do that? Well, sometimes I think we're just habit. You know, some people just have more of a proclivity for that. And other people maybe read some books about people that went through a darkness and came out and they have that, you know, faith to begin. Or, you know, I like to use a simple example in your relationship. If you're in a relationship and you have a lot of problems in the relationship and you don't address any of them, well, your relationship will probably collapse at a certain point. But we all know the experience of sitting down with someone we care about and that fear, that, you know, that worry of like, oh shit, you know, what's going to happen, right? And this is tough, but you know, here I am. And that's the worry, and that's where you crack, and that's where you go through, like, discussing the problem, which is the dis-ease over here. And then, if it's a relatively simple problem, like taking out the trash or something, you know, that you can resolve, you know, or anything else that you can resolve about treating each other better or not doing this at that time or whatever it is, then you have this. And you know that when you clear that, then you're happier. And that's a genuine happiness. That's a happiness to embrace. And the bypassing that I'm talking about is when we jump over here to deny that. I'm not talking about like spontaneous joy and happiness and just feeling good. But I think we always have to check ourselves because human beings don't like to go over here. So we have to play devil's advocate in a certain sense
why do we not like to go there if it's if it's all part of our nature?
Because we're wired that way. Unfortunately, we're imperfect beings. Our brains are wired such that our brains interpret emotional pain through the same circuitry as physical pain. So we take emotional pain to mean the same thing as a threat to our lives. And when our lives are threatened, we fight, or we flight, or we fawn, or we freeze. Right? So we go into a knee-jerk fight or flight response. So that's why thinking, I have this on the notes somewhere too, one of the positive, so we mentioned some of the good yin things we can do. Some of the good yang things we can do is we can think well. Like think well, practice thinking well, practice thinking honestly, practice deductive reasoning. You know, think things through. Because if you don't think well, your emotions are going to be in trouble. You know, if I assume that you took my watch off the table and I get all upset with you, I'm not thinking well. I need to step back and it's like, how do I know he took my watch? I'm going to ask him. Right? You ask a question, you find out the truth. That's thinking well, and then it helps you regulate your emotions. Right? And emotions benefit thinking in the sense that when we're together with somebody or a group of people and we feel held and we feel safe, our mind's open. We're more open to receiving things and hearing things that expand our horizons and allow us to see things intellectually that we didn't otherwise see. So that's how emotions and mind work together. Emotions are yin, mind is yang. So,
Are you aware of Andrew Harvey?
of course.
Because he kind of touches on some of the things that we were talking about. He talks
Yeah.
about like doing what breaks your heart. I mean, in terms
Yeah.
of trying to act in the world
Mm-hmm.
to address something that
Yep. I almost put Andrew Harvey on the quote sheet tonight. But yeah, absolutely, it's sacred activism.
And it's
So-
about allowing your heart to break.
Allowing, yeah.
Not to make it break,
Yeah,
to
you
allow
can't make
it to
it break.
break.
Right.
When it happens.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna hammer
Were you
your own
aware of
finger.
this cycle before losing your home and everything?
Oh yeah.
So was that your first time really embodying it with consciousness?
Oh no.
Um,
No. The first like major time was in my mid-20s when I went into therapy and I embodied that grief process of sort of grieving the
right.
ways that I didn't get what I wanted and needed.
could, if somebody's I talked to somebody who talked about suicide a couple of times and they said the pain is just so great, you know, the pain is just too much, you know. And is it like they're getting stuck in that, in the grieving and they don't know how to handle it or what?
Yeah, that's going into the inside and kind of getting lost down there.
That's a whole other subject.
It's a whole other subject.
Yeah,
We touched on that tonight with depression, right? And that's especially why that community and support and empathy, you know, and being held in community is important. You know, there's an article I cite in my book about how mental health problems are really on the increase with climate change. You know, they've done studies to show this and how anxiety and depression are just going up, right? And that's why as this gets worse, we need this. And we need this, but we need this kind of first. So we're just about at time here, and kind of got rolling. You see, we got rolling a little bit later. So thank you for staying over a little bit, and I hope it's been a little bit helpful, at least as a seed. Seeds are yin. Plants, when they grow, are not. It takes some incubation period. You know?
Thank you.
Nice, thank you very much, guys.
Do you have a spot for donations, Andy?
Somewhere I do.